I knew something was wrong the second I heard her laugh from across the room. It wasn't the laugh itself, it was the pause before it, like she was waiting to see if someone else would find it funny first, someone other than me. That laugh had been mine for years. I knew it better than any ringtone, any alarm clock, any voice. It used to bubble up from her without a care in the world when we were watching those dumb crime shows she loved. But that night, as I walked back into the living room holding a bowl of popcorn she'd asked for, her laugh felt like it was rehearsed, timed, and directed towards someone who wasn't me. She was on the couch, knees tucked under her, facing the laptop, giggling at something on the screen like I wasn't even in the room. I remember standing there with the bowl in my hands, realizing I was an extra in my own home. She didn't notice me at first, and when she did, she clicked her laptop shut faster than I could blink. "Just a video," she said, casually reaching out for the popcorn like nothing happened. I asked her what video it was, and she shrugged, said it was just some dumb clip from work someone had sent during a group meeting. Normally, she'd show it to me, shove the screen in my face, and say, "Look how dumb this is." But this time, she just tucked the laptop to her side like it was some fragile thing that needed protection. I sat beside her, said nothing, and started chewing, but the kernels felt like sand in my mouth, and all I could hear was the faint echo of that laugh still bouncing around in my skull. Over the next few days, the pattern repeated. Her screen time doubled. Not her phone, not even her tablet. It was always that damn laptop. She took it everywhere. The kitchen counter while cooking, the bathroom while brushing her teeth, even into bed when she used to beg me to turn off the TV. I asked her if she was working more, and she said yes, that her boss was giving her extra assignments, that she was finally being considered for a promotion. I believed her at first because why wouldn't I? You don't marry someone expecting to one day have to question everything that comes out of their mouth. But still, I started watching. Not checking her messages or sneaking into her apps, that wasn't my style. I watched her. How she moved. How her face changed when she thought no one was looking. She'd sit in the kitchen with her back to the room, typing away, and sometimes I'd see her smile, tilt her head slightly, or even bite her lip. None of it was for me. It hadn't been for weeks. The moment everything shifted happened one evening when she said she had to go into the office. It was a Saturday, and we had nothing planned, which she said was perfect because she could get a head start on some files that were due. She even offered to bring me back dinner from that Thai place I liked. I said sure, kissed her on the cheek, and walked her to the door. But something felt off. I watched her from the living room window as she got into her car and drove off. 5 minutes later, I walked out the front door, got into my own car, and followed her, not because I was trying to catch her in a lie, but because I couldn't live in the fog any longer. If I didn't know what was going on, I'd go insane. She didn't go to her office. She drove right past it without even slowing down. I stayed 2 cars behind, careful at the lights, not too close but never losing sight. After about 20 minutes, she turned into this quiet residential street on the other side of town, the kind with identical houses and trimmed hedges. She parked outside a 2-story place with a blue door and cut the engine. She didn't get out right away, just sat there. Then the porch light came on, and a man stepped out. He wasn't older, not younger either, just average. Nothing remarkable about him. But the way she got out of that car and walked straight into his arms, the way she tilted her head up and smiled before he even kissed her, that's when I knew. That 1 second, that was the moment I knew my marriage was no longer mine. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel like some guy in a movie. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. And I waited. I don't even know why. Maybe I thought she'd come back out. Maybe I wanted to see if she looked guilty when she walked out that door. But she didn't come out. Not in 5 minutes. Not in 15. Not in 45. After an hour, I turned the key and drove home, the weight of the silence heavier than any betrayal I had ever imagined. She walked through the door around 10 that night, holding a brown takeout bag like nothing happened, like she had really spent the past 3 hours organizing files and picking up pad thai. I was at the kitchen table pretending to look over a grocery list I had scribbled onto a napkin, but I hadn't been thinking about food. My thoughts were stacked in a crooked pile of questions and disbelief, all crashing down over and over. She set the bag down, gave me that tight smile people use when they're tired or trying to sell something they don't believe in themselves, and said they were closing up, so I just grabbed what was ready. She pulled out a couple of plastic containers and started setting them on the counter without looking at me, her movements too rehearsed, like she had practiced the scene in her head on the drive home. I didn't say anything at first. I just watched her hands. They were trembling, but barely, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. And I was. I was paying attention to everything. Her avoiding eye contact, the faint perfume that wasn't hers, the quick glance toward her phone that she left in her coat pocket. I stood up slowly, walked over, and opened one of the containers. The steam hit my face, smelled familiar, but it didn't matter. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even angry yet. I was waiting for her to give me a reason, a detail, a slip-up that would let me bring the hammer down without doubt. You went to the office? I asked casually, still looking at the food. She didn't flinch, just nodded. Yeah, only stayed an hour, but I figured since I was already out, I'd get food. You like the chicken sauté, right? Her voice was steady, but there was a hesitation in the way she opened the fridge, grabbed a couple of drinks, and didn't hand one to me. It was the kind of slip that people don't notice when they're busy lying. They focus on the big details and forget the small things they used to do without thinking. I drove by, I said, and finally looked at her. Her shoulders stiffened for a second, but she didn't turn around. I was out. Thought I'd swing by and say hi. Maybe bring you some coffee. She turned slowly, holding both drinks like she couldn't decide what to do with them. You drove by the office? Yeah, I nodded, taking a step closer. Funny thing, though, your car wasn't there. Place looked pretty empty for a company that's supposedly swamped with work. There it was, that flicker in her eyes. A mix of calculation and panic, like she was flipping through possible answers in her head, trying to find one that wouldn't fall apart. She set the drinks down carefully and leaned against the counter, her arms crossed. I parked out back, she said, too quickly. I didn't want to deal with the front lot. It gets crowded. That back lot with the construction dumpster and the broken lights? I asked and watched her face tighten. That's where you parked? She took a breath, her jaw tightening just enough to make her cheekbones stand out more. Ryan, what's going on? Why are you acting like this? I went to work. I got food. Now I'm home, and you're interrogating me like I'm on trial. I didn't answer her right away. I pulled out a chair and sat down, elbows on the table, hands folded. I could feel my pulse in my throat, not from fear, but from the need to keep my calm. Because I followed you, Melissa, I said. Because you didn't go to work. You drove to some house on Pelham Street. And you stayed there. For over an hour. With a guy who stood outside waiting for you like he knew exactly when you'd arrive. She didn't move. For the first time, she didn't speak. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Her eyes blinked slowly, and I watched as her body stiffened in the way someone's does when they're about to lie but realize it won't hold. You followed me? She finally said, her voice low and sharp. Don't make this about that, I replied, my tone colder now. You went in his house. You walked right up to him and hugged him before even saying hello. You smiled. You disappeared inside with him and didn't come out. So I'm going to ask once, and only once, who is he? She leaned forward, her hands on the table now, breathing a little faster. You're spying on me? What? You don't trust me? I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. You think trust is the issue now? After what I saw? After the way you looked at him? You think this is about trust? I'm not having an affair, she said quickly, then added, not in the way you think. I pushed the chair back, stood up, and walked toward the sink. I needed space, not because I was overwhelmed, but because being too close to her made me want to say things I couldn't take back. I turned on the tap, let the water run just to cover the silence, then turned it off again. You lied, I said without turning. You told me you were working. You kissed him before you walked through that door, didn't you? She didn't answer. I turned around. Tell me I'm wrong. Still nothing. Melissa, tell me I'm wrong. I didn't sleep with him, she said finally, but her voice cracked in the middle. It wasn't like that. Then what was it? I asked. A practice run? A maybe later? Emotional dress rehearsal? She sat down heavily, rested her head in her hands, and muttered something I couldn't hear. I didn't push. Not yet. I just stood there, looking at the woman I thought I knew, and waited for the moment I'd finally stop feeling surprised. She stayed at the table with her head buried in her hands for what felt like 10 minutes, saying nothing, not even moving, like if she just waited long enough I'd get bored and go to bed. I didn't. I stood in the kitchen and stared at the back of her head until she finally lifted it, her face red and her eyes bloodshot but dry. When she looked at me, there was no guilt in her face. Just tiredness. Not the kind you feel after a long day of work, but the kind that comes after weeks of lying, hiding, covering, trying to keep a secret life from spilling into your real one. She sat up straighter, wiped her cheeks, and finally opened her mouth. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, she said. It wasn't even planned. I met him at a seminar 6 months ago. He was giving some talk on workplace culture or some crap like that, and we ended up sitting next to each other at lunch. It was nothing at first, just one of those friendly conversations you forget about the next day. I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. I didn't speak. I wanted her to keep going, not because I needed the details, but because I wanted to hear her version of the story. I wanted to see how she would try to soften the reality of it, how she would try to make it sound less deliberate than it clearly was. She took a deep breath and rubbed her forehead before continuing. Then I saw him again. He came into my office to give a training a few weeks later. We recognized each other, talked a bit, had coffee after. It still wasn't anything. We talked about work, about how burnt out we both felt, about how nothing really felt exciting anymore. You know, regular stuff. But it kept happening. Emails, coffee, texting. Then we started meeting for lunch. And yeah, it crossed a line, but not at first. I didn't go into it thinking it was going to turn into anything. But we talked, and I liked how he listened to me, how he didn't treat me like furniture in the background. I could feel my jaw tightening, but I kept quiet. I knew if I opened my mouth, it would come out louder than I wanted. She looked down at her hands and shook her head. I don't know when it turned into more. It just did. One day he touched my arm, and I didn't pull away. Next time, it was a kiss on the cheek that lingered. Then the third time it was just more. I went in his place a few times, mostly just to talk, but yes, I kissed him. A few times. That's all. That's all. I asked, keeping my tone even. You lied to me, told me you were working, drove across town, walked into some guy's house, and kissed him multiple times, and that's all? She flinched a little at my tone but didn't back down. I'm not denying what happened, Ryan. I know it was wrong. I know I lied. I know I hurt you. But it wasn't about sex. I didn't sleep with him. I swear. It wasn't about that. Then what was it about? I asked. You said he listened to you. What does that mean? I've listened to every story you've told me about work for years, even the ones I didn't understand. I backed you up on every decision, supported you through every rough patch. What is it you think I wasn't doing? She sighed, like she'd already had this conversation in her head 100 times. You were here, but you weren't really with me. Everything became routine. You work from home. I come home. We eat dinner. We watch a show. We go to bed. It's the same thing every day. I felt like we were roommates. I felt invisible. You could have told me that, I said. You could have talked to me instead of sneaking around and pretending you were working late. I tried, she said quickly. I brought it up in small ways, but you never really heard me. You'd nod and say, we'll work on it. But then nothing changed. I didn't want to blow up our life. I needed to feel something again. And this guy made you feel something, I said flatly. Something worth risking all of this for. She didn't answer that. Instead, she looked down again, tapping her fingers on the edge of the table like she wanted to keep her hands moving, as if the silence was too heavy for her. I walked over and pulled out the chair across from her. I didn't sit right away. I just leaned down close enough that she had to meet my eyes. You don't get to make me the problem because you got bored, I said. You don't get to rewrite this as a story about emotional neglect because you wanted a new face to flirt with. I'm not blaming you, she said, her voice getting louder, more defensive. But I'm not going to lie and say I didn't feel like something was missing. I finally sat down, slowly, keeping my eyes on her the entire time. Then you should have left, I said. You should have said something, done something real, instead of playing pretend and sneaking around like a teenager. She looked away, her mouth pressed into a thin line. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to lose you. I just didn't know how to fix what we had. I thought maybe if I could just feel something again, I could come back to us. Well, congratulations, I said. You felt something. Now what? She didn't answer. She didn't have an answer. And for the first time, I saw it in her face, not just the guilt, not just the panic, but the realization that she couldn't talk her way out of this one. The next morning, I woke up before her, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my brain wouldn't shut off long enough to let me sleep. I lay there for a while watching the ceiling, thinking about everything she said and everything she didn't. I wasn't surprised anymore. That phase was done. I was operating in a kind of mechanical focus now, where the anger had cooled just enough to make room for decisions. I got out of bed, walked past her sleeping with her back turned to me, and went straight to the kitchen. I made coffee, not because I wanted it, but because I needed something to do with my hands while I figured out my next move. I didn't want to have some long philosophical argument about what she did or why she did it. I wasn't looking for closure or some deep emotional breakthrough. I wanted to make her feel the weight of her decisions, not through screaming or fighting, but through consequences. She wanted to feel something? She would. Just not the way she expected. By noon, I had gone through every drawer, every folder, every shared document we had stored digitally. I found what I was looking for without much effort, the backup drive we used to store everything from tax forms to vacation pictures. She never paid attention to how I organized it all, which worked in my favor now. I pulled the footage from our home security camera system, the one she forgot we had synced to my desktop. The footage was crystal clear, time-stamped, and left no room for interpretation. Her car leaving. Her car arriving. The times. The pattern. I compiled it into a short, clean-cut video, labeled it, and stored it on a USB drive I placed in my sock drawer, along with printed screenshots from our shared calendar showing the fake work meetings she had created to cover her tracks. Then I called my friend Marcus. We weren't best friends, but he was the type of person who appreciated when things were laid out plainly. He was a divorce attorney, which wasn't something I ever thought I'd need, but now felt like an emergency contact. I didn't go into the whole story. I just told him I needed to talk, and I needed discretion. We met at his office later that afternoon, and I sat across from him in a room filled with books and binders, trying not to let the weight of the situation show too much on my face. "So what's going on?" he asked, sliding a legal pad toward him and grabbing a pen. "My wife's been seeing someone behind my back," I said. "Not sexually, or at least that's what she claims, but emotionally and secretly. There's evidence. And I want to know what my options are if I decide I'm done." Marcus didn't react with surprise or pity. He just nodded slowly and asked questions about assets, bank accounts, the house, any prenup. I gave him everything he asked for, and when he was done writing, he looked up and said, "You're in a solid position if you want to move forward. No kids, shared property, no prenup. If you've got proof of infidelity, even emotional, judges tend to look at that when it comes to division." "I don't want to lose the house," I said. "You don't have to," he replied. "We can approach this smart. Quiet. But you need to be absolutely sure." "I am," I said. "But I don't want to tell her yet. I want her to feel it first. I want to take a few things back before she realizes she's lost them." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "You trying to hurt her?" "No," I said. "I'm just done making her comfortable." When I got home, she was in the living room pretending to read a book she hadn't touched in months. She looked up when I walked in, tried to read my expression, and probably thought it was safe to talk again. "Can we talk tonight?" she asked. "Not tonight," I said, hanging up my coat. "I've got some things to figure out first." "I meant it when I said I didn't sleep with him," she added, like that was going to make any of this better. "That doesn't fix anything," I said. "You built something behind my back. Whether or not you undressed for it doesn't change the fact that it wasn't for me." She closed the book slowly and stared at the floor. "So what happens now?" "You'll find out," I said. Just like I did. That night, I changed all my account passwords, unlinked our shared streaming services, disconnected her email from the Amazon account, and removed her name from my credit card. I didn't make a scene, didn't announce it. I just started reclaiming the parts of my life she had taken for granted. I booked a weekend trip under a separate account and made sure she wouldn't see the charge. I started keeping a journal of everything, every conversation, every date, every receipt. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to throw clothes on the lawn or burn photos. I was going to be precise. And I was going to make sure that by the time she realized what she'd thrown away, there wouldn't be anything left to crawl back to. She didn't ask where I'd gone that weekend. That was the first real sign she understood. The silence said everything. I left early Friday morning, before she got up, and came back late Sunday night. I didn't call. I didn't text. I let the days pass without explanation, and when I walked through the door, I saw it on her face. She'd been waiting, probably rehearsing what she'd say. But nothing came out. She just looked at me, tried to hold my eyes a little longer than usual, then turned back to the couch and acted like she was watching something. I put my bag down, hung up my coat, and didn't speak either. That quiet hung around for the next 2 days, heavy, dense, unavoidable. On Tuesday night, after dinner, I sat down at the table and called her in. She walked in slowly, cautiously, like she was expecting an argument but didn't know from where it would come. She sat across from me without asking questions, waiting for me to lead. I placed a folder on the table. Inside were 2 documents, a copy of our financial agreement and a preliminary draft of a separation plan. I didn't slide it toward her. I left it there between us, a clear line that didn't need explanation. "I'm not going to fight," I said calmly. "I'm not going to drag this through court if you don't make it ugly. I've already met with someone, and I've started the paperwork. I'm not filing yet, but it's going to happen. I wanted to look you in the eye and tell you before I made it official. She didn't touch the folder. Her hands were clasped in her lap, tense. Her voice came out smaller than I'd ever heard it. Are you really ending this? I nodded once. There's nothing to fix anymore. She looked down, nodded too, and let out a shaky breath. You won't even talk about it? There's nothing left to say, I replied. You made your choice. I'm making mine. We could go around in circles about what you felt, what I missed, what he gave you, but it won't change what you did behind my back. I'm not interested in salvaging something you already abandoned. I never wanted to lose you, she said, her voice picking up a little. I just didn't know how to come back once it started. I didn't expect it to go that far. You kept going, I said. That's the difference. People make mistakes. They stop. They confess. You built a second life and kept coming home like nothing was wrong. I was scared, she said. I was scared that if I told you, you'd walk away. Well, I said, leaning back in my chair. Here we are. She reached out, slowly, touched the folder with 2 fingers like it might burn her. Is this it? Are we really just going to separate like it was nothing? I'm not going to throw away 8 years of my life with a smile on my face, I said. But I'm not going to beg someone to stay either. You made it clear that what we had wasn't enough for you. I didn't say that, she snapped, louder now. You were enough. It was me. I was the one that was lost. Then you should have taken the time to find yourself without dragging someone else into it, I said. You don't get to pin your identity crisis on me. You lied. Repeatedly. You looked me in the face and lied. That's not someone who's confused. That's someone who made a decision. She stood up abruptly and walked toward the window. Her back was to me as she spoke again. So that's it? After everything we built, you're just going to walk away? I looked at her back and thought about all the times I'd watched her do dishes or drink coffee or read in that same spot. All the little things that used to bring me comfort, and how every single one of them now felt like a performance I hadn't seen through soon enough. I'm not walking away, I said. I'm walking out. That's different. Walking away implies I'm leaving something behind. But there's nothing left here. You emptied it all out the minute you decided to share your time, your attention, and your affection with someone else. She turned around, tears in her eyes, but she wasn't crying yet. I don't know how to be without this house. Without you. You'll figure it out, I said. Just like I am. She walked back to the table, pulled out the chair again, and sat down, this time quieter. What do you want me to do? I want you to start packing. I want you to find a place. I'll give you time, but I want this house back. I'm not leaving it, and I'm not letting you keep it. You can take what's yours. I'm not going to fight about furniture or appliances. But this place? I built this. I made this livable. You don't get to cheat and keep the walls that watched it happen. She nodded slowly. Okay. I'll pay the next month's bills. After that, you're on your own, I added. I'm not a cruel person, but I'm done being generous to someone who used my patience against me. She wiped her face, still silent, and finally reached for the folder. She didn't open it. She just held it in her hands like it was heavier than it looked. Do you think we'll ever talk again? She asked. I stood up and took my glass to the sink. Maybe. But if we do, it won't be the same. I don't forget betrayal, Melissa. I might move past it, but I don't forget. The day she left was quiet. No slam doors, no emotional farewell. She packed her things in a calm, organized way, like she was trying to show me that she wasn't angry, just accepting. I didn't help her. I didn't stand in the doorway and watch. I stayed in the kitchen with a coffee that had gone cold 2 hours earlier and waited for the sound of the front door closing behind her. When it finally did, I didn't move right away. I just sat there and let the silence confirm what I already knew. It was over. It wasn't relief, and it wasn't grief. It was something in between, something harder to explain but easier to carry than what I'd been feeling for weeks. That evening, I cleared out the rest of her drawers. She left a few things behind, probably on purpose, maybe as some kind of last attempt to keep a part of herself here, but I didn't ask. I put them in a box and taped it shut without checking what was inside. I would give it to her when she asked, but I wasn't going to chase her down with reminders of a life she chose to walk away from. I changed the locks 2 days later, not because I thought she'd come back unannounced, but because I needed the feeling of control again. It wasn't about fear. It was about boundaries. I had given so much of myself without asking questions, and now I was done giving. The first weekend alone felt strange. I walked through the house and realized how much of it had been shaped around her routines, her preferences, her ways of organizing things. There were little marks on the wall where her mirror used to hang, a gap in the bookshelf where she took all of her paperbacks. I didn't feel sad about it, just surprised at how quickly a shared life could become a solo one with the removal of a few personal items. The house didn't feel emptier. It felt clearer. I made a list of small changes to make. Nothing drastic, just things to reset the space. New sheets, different dish towels, rearranging the living room furniture. Not because it mattered to anyone else, but because I needed it to feel like mine again. A week later, I got a message from her. It was short, polite, careful. She said she found a place and would send me the address for the final paperwork. She thanked me for not making things harder than they had to be. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We were past the stage where gratitude fixed anything. A few days later, her lawyer reached out with the formal documents. I signed everything and returned them that afternoon. No hesitation. No second read. The moment I sealed the envelope, I felt lighter. Not because I was happy, but because I was done holding on to the past. People asked questions, of course. My brother called, and when I told him we'd split, he paused for a second and then asked if I wanted to talk. I didn't. He respected that. Friends reached out with the usual phrases people say when they don't know what else to offer. Some wanted details. I gave none. It wasn't out of pride. It was because I didn't need to retell the story for validation. The people who needed to know the truth already did. The rest didn't matter. One night, about 2 weeks after she moved out, I sat on the back steps with a drink and thought about everything that happened. Not in a dramatic way. I just wanted to understand it. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the same way. The anger had burned through and left a kind of sharp clarity. I could see where things had started to break down long before the affair. We had drifted, yes, but she had jumped. She had stepped off the edge while I was still trying to build a bridge. That's what stung the most, not that she found someone else, but that she didn't even tell me we were in trouble until she'd already checked out. It taught me something, though. I learned how much I had overlooked to keep things steady. I had ignored my own instincts. I had excused things that didn't make sense just to avoid conflict. I thought patience was a virtue, but sometimes patience just delays the inevitable. Now I knew better. I wouldn't carry that same mistake into whatever came next. The idea of dating again didn't excite or scare me. It just didn't interest me at all. I needed time with myself. Time to build a routine that didn't involve second-guessing or watching someone's eyes for signs they were lying. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I'd rather be alone in truth than partnered in a lie. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up to check the time or listen for footsteps that never came. The house was quiet, and for once, that silence felt earned. I never sent her a final message. There was no point. We had said everything that needed to be said in that last conversation at the table. Some endings don't need a closing line. They just need a door that stays shut. I didn't hate her, but I didn't wish her well either. I simply didn't think about her anymore.